The tragedy of Dido, Queen of Carthage, is considered to be Marlowe's earliest, first, dramatic, youthful work, which he probably wrote around 1585 while he was still a student. It must have been performed around 1587. The earliest printed edition, however, did not appear until 1594. The edition, played by the children of Her Majesty's Chapel, shows that it was still performed around 1594. There is no entry in the stationer's register. Dido reveals Marlowe's early mastery and also his profound knowledge of ancient mythology. It can hardly be without deeper meaning that the legendary figure of Dido appears in so many of Shakespeare's plays, and it can also not be the case that this figure created by Marlowe became the intellectual property of the equally old Shakespeare from Stratford without transition. Take a moment to reflect and ask yourself, can the frequency of Shakespeare's plays that reference Dido, the Queen of Carthage, be purely coincidental? King John, let Dido sigh and say she weeps again to hear the wrack of Troy. 2. Henry VI, Part 2, when he to madding Dido did unfold his father's acts, commenced in burning Troy. 3. Antonius and Cleopatra, Dido and her Aeneas shall want troops, and all the haunt be ours. Come Eros, Eros. 4. Hamlet, to Dido and thereabout of it, especially where he speaks of Priam's slaughter. If it live in your memory, begin it. It was Aeneas talked to Dido and thereabout of it, especially when he speaks of Priam's slaughter. If it live in your memory, begin it. 5. The Merchant of Venice. Stood Dido with a willow in her hand upon the wild sea banks, and waft her love to come again to Carthage. 6. Romeo and Juliet. Wench, marry she had a better love, to berhyme her, Dido a dowdy, Cleopatra a gypsy, Helen and Hero, Hildings. 7. Titus Andronicus, the wandering prince and Dido once enjoyed, when with a happy storm they were surprised. 8. The Tempest. Tunis was never graced before with such a paragon to their queen, not since widow Dido's time. Widow, a pox o' that, how came that widow in? Widow Dido. Widow Dido, said you? You make me study of that. Bait, I beseech you, Widow Dido. O Widow Dido, I, Widow Dido. And by that fire which burned the Carthage queen. 9. The Taming of the Shrew. That art to me as secret and as dear as Anna to the Queen of Carthage was. 10. A Midsummer Night's Dream. By the simplicity of Venus doves, by that which knitteth souls and prospers loves, and by that fire which burned the Carthage queen, speaks of Priam's slaughter. If it live in your memory, begin at. Experts have argued that Shakespeare was inspired by or even extensively plagiarized Marlowe's drama Dido. This thesis, however, is even less compelling compared to the unfortunately barely accepted but more plausible and logical thesis that true Shakespeare and Marlowe were in fact the same person. The author name of Hamlet's Shakespeare belonged to Marlowe's multiple pseudonyms. The living, borrowed and adapted name William Shakespeare from Stratford represented an ingenious, unsolvable protective invention of Marlowe. The recurring presence of ancient mythology in both Shakespeare's and Marlowe's works, particularly references to Dido, lends credibility to this idea. Notably, the deliberate analogy between Dido and Elizabeth I strengthens the argument that the character of Dido held significant importance for the true identity of Shakespeare, Marlowe himself. In Shakespeare's play Hamlet, there is indeed a notable reference to Christopher Marlowe's play Dido, Queen of Carthage. This occurs in Act 2, Scene 2, when Hamlet asks one of the players to recite a speech about the fall of Troy. The speech Hamlet requests bears the lines, "One chief speech in it I chiefly loved. It was Aeneas' tale to Dido." The specific passage only makes sense with the assumption that Marlowe, who wrote his unsuccessful play Dido at the beginning of his career, was also the author of Hamlet. Can you recognize any motif for the Stratford Shakespeare to out himself with love for a speech within the tale of Dido related to Priam's slaughter? Conclusive question: are the documents presented here not clear and definitive pieces of evidence supporting the thesis that the author of Dido and the author of Hamlet were the same person?